Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path to recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Good morning, Glenn.
What's up, my brother?
Hey, how you doing, my friend?
Man, doing good. How
you got a coffee problem this morning, did I hear? Are you got a half a tank?
No, I'm a little late.
You're a little late?
Well, right now it's about 7/8 full, but I think it's one of these 15/8 days that I'm going to be short.
Okay. Do you remember back in the day, like it'd be like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, you'd look at the handle and you go, can I make it? Can I make it till the next day when it opens up? Is that where you're at right now?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because, on some levels in this world, I have some intelligence, but, I don't know why. I just don't know why I just didn't buy 10 cases of handles, right? And put them in the laundry room.
Yeah, explain that to your wife and kids, though. I
didn't
it's
have
a little awkward.
I didn't have any at that time, right? So but I just don't know why I just didn't stock up, and I do know why. Because I didn't want to drink.
You didn't want to admit that
I had no problem admitting.
Okay.
But I just bought enough to get me through today because I was going to quit today. Every day I was going to quit. Every day is my last day. So I didn't want to stockpile.
Right.
Because then I had a problem, right? So I'm just going to buy enough for today. And I did that measurement, that calculation all the time. And 99% of the time, I was wrong. Yeah. I was short. I mean,
you would think you'd get better at it over the years,
in a while,
but no.
I know. I mean, I knew, but every time I'm going to buy light, I just want to drink light. I just want to drink a little bit. I want to overdrink. Every single time.
But look at you now. Look at you now. You're doing the same thing with your coffee. You poured a full cup this morning.
So one would say that's a personality issue.
Yeah, some would say.
I mean, I knew this morning when I was pouring it, I said, I'm going to be light, and boy, I was right.
All right.
So, hey, man, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Hey, we got a table for 3 today. Did you see that?
I know, that's awesome. Hey, we're just chatting with Brian, our barista.
Yeah, audio.
Hey, man, we've been together for 3 years here at the studio. He's helped us for 3 years.
Never missed.
Never missed. I mean, it's just amazing. And he looked over. He goes, "Man, it feels like 10." I'm just kidding. I'm just joking around.
Yeah. So hey, good morning, Mike. How you doing?
Hey, Mike.
Good morning.
Good. So we got Mike and Mike,
and we got some mics here. So
we got
a bunch
you're
of
right.
mics.
We got mics here. So we're room full of mics.
Let's get at it, Mike. Welcome, man. Good to have you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So Glenn, I met Mike at a Saturday morning meeting. Mm-hmm. That's where a couple of our guests.
Wait, you also go to meetings?
Yeah, I sure do.
Why? You're sober.
Oh, that's why.
He wasn't then.
There you go.
Yeah. So, Saturday morning meeting over at a little church in our neighborhood, and I came to know Mike. We had a couple other guests come out of that meeting. Karen, who's been a guest a couple of times. It goes to that meetings.
Is this that Saturday
yeah,
morning?
Saturday at St. Stephen's. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a great meeting. And
I've been there.
Met Mike, and something jumped out when I met Mike, and just maybe
it's a name, and
maybe it's a winner right there.
Yeah, you never know.
That's
right.
How
things work.
But probably the one thing that really jumps out, Mike, is that I started this game late, so I was 59 years old when I came into this program, and I almost thought, kind of like your coffee, Glenn. I almost thought, well, you know what, it's too late for me, but I wouldn't replace the years that I've had in sobriety since that time. But you're a little bit younger than me. And, now it's funny. I see Mike around town in our community, and we're going to the same events, but he's going for his kids. I'm going for my grandkids, right? So we got band, right? We share that kind of thing. And but anyway, welcome, Mike. I'm so happy to have you. And aside from being young, you pack a whole lot of wisdom in the program. And we were just talking in the parking lot downstairs about how the program works, even outside the program, things like it work and just how we apply the principles of sobriety into our everyday life. So just great to have you, man. Great to have you.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we go back? So, Mike, we've done this for a couple years now. And we used to have a format.
Yeah, we did, and we said 18 minutes too.
Yeah, we said 18 minutes, but we're still trying to figure out what we're doing. But what the original format was like for guests to come in and just share your kind of experience, strength, and hope. right?
Yeah.
Just break it up into those three the categories. One, experience what you went through, what brought you into the rooms, right? Not a total drunk-a-log, I guess, but
Right.
and then strength. What tools did you use, right? What did you learn, in the rooms of AA and on the sober path? And then hope. Where are things today? Where how are things looking today compared to how they were? Because a lot of people come on. Some of them are curious, they're like, "Hey, what's this sober shit?"
Yeah,
right? And just give someone some hope that, hey, man, I was here, I did this, and today, it's a little bit better, hopefully.
Right.
Well, I'll start by talking about what you guys are talking about with the preloading of booze in the house. Like, I was definitely the Louis Pasteur, fortune favors the prepared. I always had enough. But I just got better at drinking it, not better at planning for it. So the more I had, the faster I drank, the more I drank, right? But I never really had to worry about having it because I started drinking at I guess, my story's pretty unremarkable, but I started drinking around 12 or 13. And the only time in my life that I wasn't drinking was because I couldn't, right? It's always been that way. In high school, it was like, well, I didn't have it, right? It was inaccessible. As I got older, I always had it.
They didn't have an open bar policy during social studies.
They didn't.
That's awesome.
But I did have parents that did allow drinking at home. So not alcoholics, daily drinkers, but they did this because they loved their children. They thought that if we drank at home and if we didn't make a big deal out of it, we would be more acclimated to drinking and that we wouldn't make mistakes, right? Well, that was a mistake for an alcoholic because the day I started drinking, it was immediately self-medication. Right? Up to that point, I never really felt comfortable. I just didn't feel comfortable around people or, just anything I did. My mind was always racing. I just had, just trouble doing like the things that everybody else seemed to do very easily. Yet, because I was sort of always overthinking things and always obsessing over stuff, I could come up with some pretty brilliant stuff. Generally. So I was sort of, in my own head, I was this anomaly, right? Like, how come I can't do what everybody else can do, but I seem to be able to count the number of jelly beans in a jar so much better?
All right, wait, time out. You're in high
check.
school at this stage, right?
This is, I kind of reverted back to like early youth before I was drinking. This was my uncomfortableness
This sounds
was always
very intuitive, very self-aware of what you're about, right? Of knowing that you were just uncomfortable. And I like, hey, you know what? I self-medicated. I immediately knew I was self-medicating.
Check. Yep, I'm loving the story.
Because of
I see the
XYZ.
similarities, right?
No, I think that's, and hey, I think that's why a lot of people start drinking young, because it's, hey, I've got this, I recognize this, and it solves it immediately with one drink or two drinks.
I personally think that, insanity really only takes two things: a little intelligence and one bad idea. And I spent time trying to think of why I'm different when I was a kid, and what I came to decide. My decision was that I was somehow a different species. I was similar to other people, but I behaved differently, and that was how I was. I did accept that I was different, which I think became progressively more detrimental. Because then I started manipulating people. I started to say, what could I do to make them think I'm like them, right? And all of my human interactions were always a game, right? Like, what did I have to say to get that person to do what I wanted? And, just like drinking, it was fun for a while, right? I liked getting in people's heads and things like that. But the drinking always started with, wow, I actually can just be a normal person now. I can just talk about one thing without my mind going in a ton of directions. I can be relaxed around somebody. Just things flow, right? And I bet you that would have worked really well if I could stop, right? If I could have maintained a certain, let's call it a buzz, right? If I could have stayed at a certain point, I probably would have been okay. But starting around 17, when I got, immediate and always access to alcohol, I was drunk for 20 years straight. Drunk every day. Now, I didn't know that was drunk because I was drunk all the time. So I honestly believed before I came to AA that drunk meant blacked out. So I was like, well, I've been drunk on several occasions, right? And then it's funny, my story about how I got into alcoholics now is, yeah. I mean, I did learn a lot about alcoholism from Alcoholics Anonymous. That's not a surprise. But I didn't realize how wrong I was about what alcoholism was before that. I talked to my mom, I'd say 10 months into sobriety, and I told her this. I said, I thought that, drunk meant blacked out. And she was like, well, what does blacked out mean? And I was like, it's when you don't know where you are and you time travel and you wake up in a bathtub and you're wondering what happened last night. And she goes, did that actually happen to you? and I was like, yeah, pretty regularly. And she was like, that's unbelievable. Why did you continue to drink after that?
Why?
So it's funny. We have, or I have a connection, probably a 10-year plus connection. His name's John. And I call him John 3.0. And I think you may be John 3.0 version 2. Okay. And John 3.0 is, I really believe, like you, for 20 years, he was a 3.0 blood alcohol level at all times.
Right.
Like, he drank around the clock for 20 years until he landed up in 18 days in ICU with his esophagus breaking down, with whatever that's called. And so you drove that way, you went to school that way, you functioned that way, right?
Yep.
I learned how to function that way.
Did anybody else know it or smell it? Or
I think everybody knew it except me.
Yeah.
Right? So, I had plenty of examples.
Did you go to school drunk?
Yep. Graduated drunk. I got married drunk. I never lost a job drunk. Wow. I went to work drunk.
Well, you're a winner.
Well, you should have. I took the entrepreneurial path. That way I couldn't get fired.
I think that's awesome.
I did tell somebody. Somebody told me. I was coming out of a blackout actually in college, and it was a girl that I worked with. I went to classes with, and I knew for a while. And we were at a party, and I don't know what we were talking about until she said this thing. She said, I never know if you're drunk or not. And I woke up because I said the honest response. That's because you've never seen me sober. And that at least gave me impact for 10 minutes, 15 minutes before I disappeared. And, when in my first real job, I guess, somebody told me, whenever we go out, you're the first one drunk and you're the last one to go home. And that one woke me up. And I was like, man, he's right. Why do I get drunk? Why am I drunk before I get here? That was what kind of occurred to me. It was like he thought that was my first drink of the day.
So during all this time, you wake up and have a drink, right?
As soon as it made sense to, because I was a very pragmatic alcoholic, right? Like I knew if I drank before work, then maybe I wouldn't get there. So I wouldn't start drinking until lunchtime or the first time that I could get away. Now I was enabled by a lot of the jobs that I had. I worked on the trading floors. I worked for European companies, right? And then I worked where my bosses were remote. So I always had jobs where I could get away with it.
That sounds like an entrepreneur almost.
and
a lot of freedom.
And that was somewhat strategic, right? When I had job opportunities, alcoholism has had a way of being the undertone to everything. When I may not have been consciously thinking about it, but it was like, will I be able to maintain my lifestyle with this job? My boss will be in Australia. Yeah, I could pull this off, right? And
was that before video?
Yes, that was before video. But that kind of stuff did come along, and I figured out how to get around it, right? Like, like I said, I got married drunk. I married somebody who doesn't drink. She's got a different type of allergy, right? She takes a shot of cranberry juice, and she giggles and passes out. So I was able to just tell her, I've got a unusually large Irish liver, and this is just how Irish people are. She didn't know, right? So out of all the people who didn't know about, that I had a drinking problem, it was her. When I first told her that I was going to AA, she said, why? And I was like, well, because I'm an alcoholic. And she said, you lied to me. And I was like, no, honey, I lied to myself. Right. But I have 4 kids, young family, and we bought more Jim Beam than milk. And I had 2 kegs in the garage at all times, right? And that got me through a month.
That's
so
standard Irish. I see where you came from. It's standard Irish.
to me, it was totally normal. To me, it was just totally normal to why drink orange juice when I can have a beer, right? And and yes, I convinced myself I was a functioning, at that point not an alcoholic, but I was a functioning drunk. Like I knew that I drank more than other people, but I had 2 cars in the garage, that kind of thing, right? And my life was not in shambles, so I had no reason to. To be perfectly frank, I'm not sure why I came to AA in the first place.
Right, I was going to say, did the wheel fall off, or did you roll the car into AA?
Well, I definitely rolled it off the road, but I didn't crash. So I do have a tendency to self-sabotage. When things, I drink a lot because I'm bored, and I do cause myself turmoil because I'm bored. And I've never been fired from a job, but I've quit plenty. And I was working for a very large corporation that was acquired by another corporation, and they wanted me to sign some paperwork, right? So they said, you don't need to change your desk, you just get paid the same, and you get to sit here and watch paint dry.
Okay, that sounds simple.
Yeah, it sure was. So simple that I quit.
Okay.
I said, I'm not signing the papers. And they're like, well, this is a really bad move. You should consider this. And I think all of the people that were working for that company knew that you're going to have trouble finding a job that lets you go down to the bar down,
right.
And, but, I had a lot of hubris. And I was like, no, I'm going to go out. I'm going to be entrepreneurial. I'm going to do this on my own. And, when I left, I really think this kind of probably was, I think this was God's plan. This wasn't my plan. I quit. My last day was December 28th, and I had this New Year's Eve party. Pretty typical. Great to have New Year's Eve parties when you have a bunch of little kids and your friends have little kids, because everybody leaves at 10 o'clock. But they bring the booze that would get them through midnight. So
that's classic.
I'd stay up until 4 a.m. just drinking whatever champagne bottles were up. I hate champagne, but it was open.
It was open,
right?
Yeah. Can't waste it.
And so I'm sorry I said I wouldn't make this a long drunk-a-log, but long story short, I had about a 30-day supply from that party, and I said I'm going to drink everything in the house, and when that's done, then I'm going to start my company. I didn't say I was going to get sober. I said I was going to start my company, and then there was probably like this intrinsic, I'm also not going to drink all that much. And then so February 1st, I went to my first AA meeting. And I honestly didn't know what AA was.
It's a long New Year's Eve party.
Yeah.
It's a little longer than Mikey's.
Yeah, right. A little longer than it needed to be, that's for sure. I mean, at that time, certainly my wife was starting to think there was a problem. Like, I was not only just buzzed all day, I was drunk all day, right? And at this point, I've got 4 kids, 4 kids that are wondering why Dad never leaves the couch. And then when I told her I was going to go to this AA meeting, even then she was like, why? You don't have a problem. And I went into the AA meeting thinking that Alcoholics Anonymous was a way to teach you to control your drinking, right? Not abstinence. I didn't think that was part of the program. And I went into that meeting, and it was at this church, the one that I met Mike at. That was my first one, and 6 guys took me into a room and 12-stepped me. And they were
talking. What does 12-step mean?
They start by explaining the fundamentals. It's really mostly about step 1, but the fundamentals of we know where you're at, and we've got a solution, and we can help you, right? If you do what we do. And they told me their stories, kind of like I'm doing here now. And I didn't hear them right, because I heard about how much they drank, and I heard about how they've got it. They've got it sorted out now, and they're here at 8 o'clock in the morning talking to me about it. So I was like, I'll be able to drink as much as these guys, and then I'll still be able to go get up at 8 in the morning. And
those guys have
sign me up.
They have the solution.
Yeah, sign me up.
And I left that meeting with confidence. I saw those 12 steps, and I'm like, I can have this done by next week, right?
Achiever.
I went to a bar later that day and I was raving. The bartenders probably thought it was hilarious, but I was telling everybody at the bar about how I went to this 12-step program thing, and I was going to have it all figured out. And I had 1 beer there. I had one beer just to prove that I could have 1 beer. Long story short, 4 days later, it was 3 in the morning, and my wife comes down and says, I thought you were going to quit drinking, right? And I said, I am. This is my last one. And that really was my last drink.
Wow.
I went back to that same meeting, hat in hands, and I was early because I had to make appropriate excuses, right? I had to present myself right. And a guy who's still my sponsor now, was there making coffee, and he said, didn't expect to see you again. And then I knew I didn't fool anybody, and my story, it's kind of like Mike Tyson said, like everyone's got a plan until they get hit in the mouth. Nothing could come out of my mouth. And he just said, I don't think someone like you is going to get this on your own. I can help you. I will work with you. And he did. And he's still my sponsor today. And I never had a drink since because I got humbled right away. I realized, I thought, I got this, 3 most dangerous words in my life. And I was shown, I think this is all, part of God's plan. I was shown very, very early that I do not have this. And my program...
But we do.
That's why I'm here, Glenn.
Right, so we program. We have it.
That's right. And yes, that was the first lesson I learned was if he works with me, if I work with AA, then it will work. On my own, I will convince myself that I got this. But I'm constantly reminded that I don't as long as I keep my mind in the program, right? And as long as I keep doing the things, like I do have a blessing that maybe some people don't think of as a blessing. I didn't at first. Is that my alcoholism, my ism does not go away. I wake up every morning as an untreated alcoholic. And if I don't do my readings, if I don't pray, I can tell by 8:30 that I'm a mess. And it didn't seem like a mess before, but I know it is now. Like my mind is doing that thing again where I can't focus on something and I'm worrying about stuff that are permutations of stuff that couldn't possibly happen. And I just feel like I am out of control then. And, I know that, I know that, what we spend a lot of time trying to understand what that we don't have control over things. I do have control over myself. I can discipline my mind to do what God wants me to do.
Isn't it amazing? I suffered in school. I was one of the first, probably a pioneer of this ADD. They probably named it after me. And,
in the 80s, I think they just called it Stop It.
That's right.
I also had this condition.
Right. But it's funny because so then, once they labeled me with ADD, I lived ADD, right? Okay, you're going to label me that way. And then there's a squirrel. Do you want to see the squirrel? And, but I realized in adulthood and absolutely in sobriety that I am, like you said, I do control that. And I have the ability, the blessing to control that and focus on things and take that energy and keep it laser focused instead of so abstract and so wide view. And I'm grateful for that. But I agree with you.
I hear a lot of people when they talk about their strength and hope part, right? And it sounds to me like they're like, it's gone. It's gone. I'm like, and I God bless them. I'm happy for them that that's true. But I am very grateful that that is not me, because if it was, I would forget all of this.
Right.
I would not go to AA. I would not get on my knees, and I would be right back where I was. So I've got this constant reminder of, man, I haven't changed. Which is also something I was worried about in AA. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my personality. Right. These character defects are my personality. This is what I am. And I sometimes like myself. Sometimes I love myself, right? Now I love myself a lot more, right? Because now I don't irritate myself. I'm not as bad of a roommate anymore. I used to be like, God, I can't get away from this Mike guy.
Right.
And now I don't mind myself so much because all I have to do is calm myself down. And prayer works for me really well. Meditation, not so much, right? I still don't like to be in that, empty, room of my head.
Sure.
But prayer works so well. I must have prayed 3 times on the drive over here. I used to be afraid to drive.
So what does that look like? What does prayer look like for you? When you say you prayed 3 times over here, what did you pray?
I talk to something, a higher power, which, I often reference as God. I talk to God. I was raised Catholic. The prayers that you say as fast as possible because you have them memorized never did much for me, right? Like I knew what the words meant and I just rattled through them. But what I learned from AA is how to pray is, if you want a relationship with a person, you talk to them on your level, right? You talk to them about what's bothering you and then wait for a response. And so my prayer really is, instead of those worries that just kind of like were like a feedback loop in my head, just going over and over and what's going to happen now, what's going to happen now, what's going to happen now. I have this talk with like this, what I call God, but this abstract thing where I'm just kind of, saying, I hope I don't get in a car accident, right? Because I'm having trouble paying attention to the road. This is a real common problem for me, right? I just say, God, I need to keep my eyes on the road. I don't say, God, please make me not go to jail. Please. It's more like, I need to keep my eyes on the road. Like, I need your help to do it, right? And then it works. It works right away, because there was a reading this morning too, and it said, don't ask, like, don't think that God is a reluctant, benevolent thing that like you have to beg to get the things. Think of him as a generous God that wants to help.
Well, it's like a dad,
right?
It's like a dad. Your dad wants great things for his kids. All right. So question: how long have you been sober again?
7 years.
7 years. So what does today look like? 4 kids. What does your day look like today? How do you feel today different than you did,
7 years ago.
7.5 years ago?
Right.
Today, it's not all about me. So my what I've been initially forced to do.
Man, is that a reminder just shot in the middle of my forehead? I love it.
I was
writing that one down.
I was forced early on to start taking some service commitments. I was made the chairman of my first meeting. Not my first meeting, but I was made the chairman. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right for me. And then I was like, so what does the chairman have to do? And he's like, you see all those chairs? You got to stack them up after the meeting. And I was like, all right, fine. I was like, all right, I got to start at the bottom and work my way up.
That's awesome.
And
I just love how this shit happens.
Yeah, I mean, like a bunch of pretty gruff people that reminded me of my grandfather told me, make coffee, stack chairs, and then it was like, no, you really are the chair now. Now you got to lead the meeting, right? And just read from the paper. This is not your meeting. This is ours. So just read that.
Yep.
And so I took a lot of demeaning, below me type of work, but then, it became such a natural response to somebody asked me to do something. I can do it. So I had this inferior superiority dichotomy going on all the time, where it's like, I can do it better than you, but I'll probably screw it up. And so like, because the things that people were asking me to do were easy, and then people would say, this is actually really important though, what it started to make me realize is that I can be useful to other people without breaking my back and without showing off that I'm great at everything. And so I did get into a habit, which this is absolutely what keeps me sober, of doing things for people, originally not because of compassion, because I had to do it, because I needed to stay sober, and this is an easy thing that I can do. So it became this gradual working part of my life to when somebody needs me and I can do it, I do it, right? And it's very different than how it used to be, because I started as a manipulator. I was nice to you, or I told you a certain thing because I might need something from you in the future, right? It was definitely a quid pro quo kind of thing. That was not, not fully disclosed. I was just like, I need to keep you as an asset. I thought of people as assets. And now I am their asset, right? And yeah, sometimes I get, I have a pity party and I'm like, all I do is things for other people. Nobody does anything for me. But then I realize I don't need anything. Like at this point, my day is full.
But those pity parties don't last very long, do they?
No.
I mean, they're almost like a snippet for me, because I think that. I mean, boy, I live a thankless life, But I mean, I think that for like 30 seconds, and then I'm like, come on, Glenn, right? And
it's like what we were talking about in the parking lot.
Yeah,
what is define fun? What is fun? And it's like, well, I'm doing a lot of great things, and I'm not upset. So this is good enough, right? It's more like a stoic approach to, peace and serenity. I want serenity, not happiness.
Right. Well, I'm sure what happiness is, but I know what peace is.
Yeah.
So Mike, how old were you when you walked through the door of that first AA meeting?
I was 37.
Okay, so what do you tell the 37-year-old right now who knows that they've got a drinking problem, right? And they know it. They know that the last drink they had should have been the last drink they have. What do you tell that person about AA these days? Because AA does have a persona, and a lot of the meetings I go to are, as you described, your grandfathers in there. What do you tell? Because I think it takes a little extra oomph to get through and crack that barrier and do it for yourself when maybe it's not the most relatable situation. So what do you tell the next?
I usually tell people, I mean, I think you know this as well. If somebody's not ready, you can't tell them the right thing anyway.
Right.
I can tell them what I did, right? Which is, I guess, what we're doing on this podcast. I can tell them that this worked for me, and I also tell them that this wasn't my first attempt. This is the thing that worked for me and nothing else did. And I've got plenty of books that didn't work if you want to start with that. And you can go to therapy. It's a nice, expensive way to get a big book, right? But, I've got younger brothers, one of them that's in recovery now.
Oh, awesome.
So I just recently went through this, and I learned it the hard way, right? And I'm that type of person. I have to learn the hard way. I desperately wanted to help. And my sponsor said, you need to kind of step back and let things happen, right? You got to stop fixed managing and controlling things. And it worked by me saying, I want this for you, but I get that this is not for everybody. If you want to keep drinking, keep drinking. If you don't, is that...
Yeah, I didn't realize,
That must be the hook.
Beer one. There we go. Go
That
ahead,
must
Mike.
be the hook.
And I kind of lost my train of thought there. But I mean, it was, all I can be is a compassionate person that has a common affliction. Okay. And all I can do is talk about what works for me, and then say, as far as the old timers, first of all, I like being around, older people, right? Because they just naturally seem like mentors, right? So I'm there to learn, right? And to learn to get well, and I'm going to learn it from the experienced person. And there's a lot of fun you can have with young people in AA too. I go to men's meetings that are very young. I used to golf with a lot of them. You can do everything.
Wait, you can golf sober?
Oh, much better, I might add. If you surround yourself, there's plenty of younger meetings, and if you surround yourself with the people that you want to be around, this is in getting sober in a larger city, in a larger metropolis like we have. You got so many options. And if you don't feel comfortable in a particular meeting, find another one. There's a whole directory, and each one's got its own flavor. And I found mine pretty quickly, and my brother found his, and it's just a matter of giving it a shot, and sticking with it, because all I did was come up with excuses why looking for an exit. This is how I'm going to get out if I want to, and I'm just glad I never took that door.
I'm glad you did too.
Give it a shot.
Again, I appreciate you, because in the community, I see you work in AA in the meetings, but then when we're in the community and we're at a band concert, you bring me comfort and peace, because I know that's where the program really plays out, is in the community, and thank you for being there for me. I appreciate you.
I'll tell you, it took me a few years too to realize that I started to really understand people in AA and really care about them, right? And really get on their wavelength. Now, after a couple of years, I realized that they might not be alcoholics, but other human beings. They're a lot like me too, and I don't feel as isolated as I did. Right. Now I feel like I'm starting to get these people, and now I can, act like a good AA outside of AA now.
I know, right?
And it is funny how we run into each other, isn't it? And we got our own little secret language.
It's great. Yeah, look, we need a handshake or something, a secret. Yeah, right. Mike, thanks so much, man.
Why don't we do this?
Yes.
First of all, give it a shot and stick with it.
Give it a
just
shot.
Wrote those
Stick
down.
with it. Yep.
Love to have you come back.
Yeah.
Sure.
This clearly was not long enough. So we will get you back on the calendar for future sessions. Really value you. Thanks for taking the time to come in. And, it's not all about me, Mikey.
I know. That's my takeaway, too.
I learned that, too.
Jeez.
I know. I love it.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@Sober.Coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.
Stay safe in the city of Chicago.